Imagine waking up one morning to find your neighbor's car parked in your own garage, without a single word of permission. Sounds insane, right? Well, that's exactly what happened to me. And what I did next. It changed everything. This isn't just a story about a garage, it's about fighting back when people think they can walk all over you. Buckle up, because you're about to hear how I took control and refused to be anyone's doormat. It was a quiet Saturday morning, the kind I lived for. The sun filtered through my kitchen window, bathing the countertops in a warm golden light. I had just made my usual French press coffee and was halfway through my second sip when I heard it, a low rumbling engine. At first, I didn't think anything of it. My neighbor sometimes started his truck early to get to the golf course, and a few houses down, someone was always tuning up their muscle car. But this noise felt different. Closer. Then it happened again. A brief rev, the unmistakable sound of a vehicle shifting into park, followed by a sudden silence. I frowned and set down my mug. Something wasn't right. The sound hadn't come from the street, or a nearby driveway. It had come from inside my house. Or at least, very close to it. I walked over to the side window near the garage and peeked through the blinds. Nothing. But I could still hear something, a faint metallic clicking, like a car engine cooling off. And it was coming from the garage. My garage. My instincts kicked in. My first irrational thought was that someone had broken in. Maybe a thief trying to steal tools. But who drives into a garage they're breaking into? I grabbed my phone and quietly walked down the hallway toward the garage door. No signs of forced entry in the house, no shattered windows or open doors. Everything looked normal, except for that sound. I reached the interior garage door, took a deep breath, and twisted the handle. As the door creaked open, I froze. Sitting smack in the middle of my garage, perfectly aligned with the painted parking lines on the floor, was a silver Lexus RX 350. A luxury SUV. Clean. Polished. Still humming from the engine that had just been shut off. My garage remote was still on the kitchen table. The main door was still closed, so whoever had parked in here must have had their own opener, or had followed me home recently and memorized the code. My brain raced through possibilities, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a mistake? But how do you accidentally park in someone's garage? I stepped closer, examining the unfamiliar vehicle like it was some kind of alien artifact. That's when I saw the note. It was stuck to the inside of my fridge door with one of my own magnets, written in hurried cursive on a hot pink sticky note, borrowing your garage for a few days. HOA approved. Karen, block captain. My mouth dropped open. I reread the note. Twice. Then a third time. It didn't change. The audacity of what I was looking at started to sink in. Karen. Of course. The self-proclaimed block captain, who treated our HOA like her personal kingdom. The same woman who once left a warning on my door for planting non-compliant shrubbery. The same Karen who measured lawn heights with a ruler and snitched on teenagers for parking too close to the curb. And now, apparently, she had decided that my garage was available for rent, or donation, to herself. Without asking. Without notice. Without permission. I stepped back and looked at her Lexus again. It was perfectly comfortable. Parked like it belonged. As if it were the natural order of the universe that her luxury SUV should reside safely inside my private, locked, personally maintained garage. I could almost hear her smug voice in my head. Well, no one was using it, and mine was full. I had to sit down for a moment just to breathe. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was Karen being Karen, only this time, she'd gone too far. And that's when I made a decision. A calm, deliberate, glorious decision. I was going to lock the garage door. And then? Oh, I had plans. I stood there for a long moment, still staring at the silver Lexus like it had materialized from another dimension. My heart thudded in my chest, somewhere between disbelief and indignation. The quiet of the garage made the situation feel even more surreal. I could still hear the gentle ticking of the cooling engine, as if the car itself was smugly settling in for a stay. Then it hit me. This wasn't just annoying. This was a violation. Not just of space, but of respect. Of privacy. Of basic decency. Who does that? Who rolls into someone else's garage like it's a hotel valet drop-off and leaves a sticky note like it's some kind of favor? My heart started pounding faster, not from fear, but from pure disbelief and rising anger. My mind raced with questions. How did she get in? When? Why my garage? What kind of narcissistic HOA logic convinced her this was okay? I walked around the car slowly, half expecting her to pop out of the back seat yelling, "Surprise!" But it was empty. No Karen. Just leather seats, a designer purse tossed lazily in the passenger seat, and a key fob tucked neatly in the cup holder. She wasn't just borrowing space. She was settling in. That was the moment I noticed something even more disturbing: the garage keypad. The rubber buttons had fresh fingerprints, a smudge of lotion or maybe makeup. Had she figured out my entry code? Or did she have a universal opener? The idea made my skin crawl. I thought back to the few times I'd seen her walking her dog past my house, always glancing a little too long at my security cameras or the way I'd mounted my keypad under the eaves. Had she been planning this? Was she watching and waiting for the right moment to sneak in? My pulse spiked with a strange mix of adrenaline and violation. This wasn't a neighborly misunderstanding. This was a breach. Of boundaries. Of trust. Of everything that made home feel safe. I stormed back into the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and dialed the HOA's main line. A robotic voice answered first, then transferred me to the on-duty property manager. Green Valley Estates HOA, this is Dana. How can I help you? Yeah, hi. This is Mason Holloway, 112 Maple Drive. I have a bit of an emergency, or a really stupid prank. I'm not even sure which yet. There's a car in my garage. Pause. A car? Do you mean like an abandoned vehicle near your driveway? No. In my garage. A silver Lexus. Belongs to Karen. You know Karen, the block captain? There was a sigh on the other end. The kind that says this isn't the first time. Oh boy. Karen again? Yeah, Karen again. She left a note on my fridge. Says she's borrowing my garage and that the HOA approved it. I can assure you we did not. That's highly inappropriate. She doesn't have the authority to commandeer anyone's property. My heart was still hammering, but now with a bit more relief. I wasn't crazy. This wasn't allowed. I had backup. Well, what should I do? I asked. I can't just let her leave her car here. Dana was quiet for a moment. Honestly? You're within your rights to have it towed. It's trespassing. But if you want to handle it your way, just keep a record of everything. I looked back at the Lexus, still resting like royalty inside my garage. Oh, I'll handle it, I said quietly. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a lesson taught. A lesson in boundaries. And I knew exactly how to start. There it was. Still smug and immaculately parked, as if it belonged there. The silver Lexus RX 350 sat in the center of my garage like some entitled guest who invited themselves to dinner and then demanded the best seat at the table. Sleek chrome accents gleamed under the single overhead light. The tan leather interior looked untouched. No dust, no wear, not even a forgotten coffee cup. It was showroom ready, and it was parked squarely inside my garage. The more I looked at it, the more ridiculous it felt. The vehicle hadn't been dropped off in a hurry. This was no accident. The wheels were aligned perfectly with the paint markings I'd added to the concrete when I moved in, a subtle guide to help me park straight. Karen had followed them like she'd done it before. That realization made my skin crawl. I circled the Lexus slowly. There were no scratches, no dents, and no signs of it being anything other than her everyday ride. Her personalized license plate read, "KRN loves 2WLK." I rolled my eyes so hard I nearly gave myself a headache. Yeah, that tracks. I leaned into the passenger window and scanned the interior again. There was a half-empty bottle of sparkling water in the cup holder, a reusable tote bag in the back, and a clip-on air freshener labeled Pacific Lavender. On the dashboard, a small card was tucked under the windshield, HOA Block Captain, Karen D. Like she was some kind of parking enforcement officer for the neighborhood. I could almost hear her voice in my head again, that condescending tone she always used during HOA meetings. Well, if no one's using the space, it's just common sense to share, right? No, Karen. That's not how property works. I stepped around to the back of the car and noticed a faint smear of shoe polish on the back bumper, probably from her Pomeranian jumping in and out. I'd seen her walking that tiny rat dog every morning at precisely 7:14 a.m., like it was a military drill. She waved to everyone she liked. She glared at the people she didn't. I always got the glare. There were warning signs, in hindsight. She once borrowed my hose without asking to water a dying azalea she'd planted on public property. Another time, she put a citation on my neighbor's mailbox for having an off-brand trash can. And who could forget the time she tried to implement a curfew for outdoor grilling? This was her ultimate power trip. I stared at the car and felt something shift in me. The anger wasn't just about the car, it was about everything. Years of HOA tyranny. Her constant need for control. Her smug entitlement. She thought she could just take something that wasn't hers, because no one ever stood up to her. Well, she picked the wrong garage this time. I turned on my heels, walked into the house, and went straight to the closet. Inside, I grabbed a thick padlock I used for my shed and a chain I kept from when I helped a buddy move a heavy trailer. Next, I pulled out a spare garage door remote and disabled it. Then I set the app to lock down remote access entirely. No one, not even Karen, was getting that Lexus out without my say-so. I didn't yell. I didn't rage. I didn't call the police or knock on her door. I just quietly secured my garage. Because if Karen thought she could treat my property like her personal carport, I was going to show her what happens when you mess with a man who values peace and privacy. And soon, she was going to miss her Lexus very, very much. After securing the garage, I walked back into the house, my pulse still riding a slow, simmering wave of disbelief. I needed to figure out exactly when this all happened, when Karen had entered my garage, when she'd parked her Lexus, and more importantly, how she managed to get inside without setting off the security system. That's when I remembered, I'd turned off the garage sensor 2 nights ago while working on a wiring project in the attic. Perfect timing. Or in Karen's case, perfect opportunity. As I stepped into the kitchen, I noticed something off. There was something stuck to the refrigerator door, bright pink, like it was begging to be noticed. I walked over and froze. It was a sticky note. My sticky note. From my office drawer. Written with my Sharpie. It had my handwriting on the backside from a grocery list I'd tossed in the trash the night before. She dug it out and flipped it over. And on the clean side, she had scribbled a message in cursive so rushed and arrogant, it may as well have been a royal decree. Borrowing your garage for a few days. HOA approved. Karen, block captain, that was it. No please. No contact number. No request for permission. Just a flat-out declaration, like this was the neighborhood version of Manifest Destiny. Borrowing your garage. I reread the note several times, hoping I had misunderstood. Hoping that maybe, just maybe, there was a joke hidden in there somewhere. But no. It was every bit as smug and absurd as it looked. And then came the line that sent my blood pressure soaring, HOA approved. I chuckled. Not because it was funny, but because it was so outrageous that laughter was the only logical reaction. Karen didn't have the authority to approve anything of the sort. She wasn't a board member. She wasn't even on the landscaping committee anymore after that fiasco with the mandatory rose bushes. She was simply the self-appointed block captain, a title she invented, printed, laminated, and wore around her neck at every HOA event like it was a military medal. The phrase HOA approved written in her chicken-scratch handwriting was nothing more than a delusion, one that she genuinely believed gave her power over other people's lives, properties, and garages. As if she had walked into my space, parked her luxury SUV, and then left me a napkin note saying, "Don't worry," I asked myself. I said yes. The level of entitlement was staggering. And yet, this was so Karen. The woman had previously tried to implement a community dress code for trash days. She left flyers on windshields about parking angles. She even suggested we install a neighborhood chime to go off every evening at 8 p.m. so children know it's time to return indoors. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the note, just in case she tried to deny it later. Then I snapped a few more photos of the car from different angles, including the license plate and the interior with her bag still visible. Evidence. I needed a paper trail. With Karen, things always got messy, and I wasn't about to let her spin this into some ridiculous story about shared community assets. I looked at the fridge again. That little pink square was the final straw. The exclamation mark on years of passive-aggressive infractions. She thought she could leave a note and that would make it okay. What she didn't realize was that this time, she'd picked a fight with someone who wasn't going to play by her unwritten rules. This time, She parked in the wrong garage. And I was about to remind her just whose house this was. He came just before noon, sharp, deliberate, and annoyingly confident. 3 raps. A pause. Then 2 more. I didn't need to check the peephole. I already knew. Karen. I opened the door slowly, calmly, already rehearsing my inner monologue to keep from saying anything that might qualify as a threat. She stood there in her signature outfit, pastel polo shirt tucked into pressed khakis, HOA name tag hanging from a lanyard around her neck like she was on some neighborhood security patrol. Her sunglasses sat high on her head like a crown. And she was holding a reusable water bottle labeled, Karen D., Block Captain. The smugness practically radiated off her. "Excuse me," she said, drawing out every syllable like it was a spell. "Did you lock your garage?" I raised an eyebrow. "Sure did." She tilted her head as if I were a child who had just colored outside the lines. "Well, I need access to my vehicle. You seem to have blocked me in." I leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms. "That's because you parked in my garage without permission." Her eyes narrowed, lips tightening into a forced smile. "Well, as I mentioned on the note I left, I'm just using the space temporarily. My driveway is being repaved, and the HOA guidelines say we're encouraged to work together during maintenance." I stared at her. "You didn't ask. You didn't even knock. You just broke into my garage and parked like you owned it." She scoffed. "It's not breaking in if the door was accessible. You shouldn't leave your keypad exposed. Anyone could figure out the code." I blinked. "So? You admit you guessed my code?" She shrugged. "It wasn't hard. It's 4 digits. You use 1985 for everything. I saw it on your mailbox once." My jaw clenched. She had been watching. Digging through small clues. Memorizing things she had no business knowing. "And you thought that gave you the right to just move in?" "It's not moving in," she snapped. "It's temporary. And frankly, Mason, I expected more neighborly spirit from you. We all make sacrifices to keep the community pleasant." I stepped forward, my voice calm but cold. "No, you make demands. You expect everyone to roll over when you decide to play queen of the cul-de-sac. But this time, you picked the wrong house." She crossed her arms now, mirroring my posture. "Are you threatening me?" "No. Just letting you know your car isn't going anywhere until I get back." "Back from where?" I grinned. "Vacation. 10 days. Leaving tonight." Her mouth opened, then shut. For once, words failed her. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would. And I am. I already bought the plane ticket. Left the keys with a friend. Garage is locked. Remote access is disabled. And by the way, the HOA doesn't approve this." I called them. Her face turned a shade of red that would make a fire hydrant blush. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You're making a very serious mistake. I am the block captain. And I'm the guy who owns the garage your Lexus is trapped in." I started closing the door. She stepped forward. "You're going to hear from my lawyer." "Cool," I said, nodding. "Tell them to bring jumper cables. I hear car batteries don't like sitting idle for 10 days. Then I shut the door. And behind it, I laughed. Because this time, Karen wasn't getting the last word. I peeked through the blinds just in time to catch Karen storming down my driveway, heels clicking like gunshots on the concrete. Her water bottle swayed violently in her clenched fist, and her ponytail whipped side to side like it was just as outraged as she was. She marched across the street to her house, muttering to herself, her steps quick and jerky, like she couldn't decide whether to call a lawyer, the police, or just declare martial law over the neighborhood. I sipped my coffee and smiled. Karen was fuming. Properly, cosmically fuming. The kind of mad where someone's entire worldview crumbles and they have no backup plan except righteous indignation. She slammed her front door behind her, loud enough that I heard it from across the street. A minute later, her blinds snapped shut. Then open. Then shut again. She was pacing inside, peeking through slats like a sitcom villain, probably already drafting an HOA-wide email titled something like "Emergency Misuse of Shared Community Resources." I could only imagine what she was typing. "It is with deep concern that I inform you of a very serious breach in neighborly etiquette." Meanwhile, I was upstairs packing. Light. Just the essentials. Some hiking clothes, my camera, a couple of good books, and a charger for my laptop. 10 days in the mountains. No HOA meetings. No passive-aggressive flyers. No uninvited Lexus squatting in my garage. I had already made arrangements with my buddy Matt to swing by once midweek to check on the house and water the plants. I handed him the garage lock key and told him, "Do not under any circumstances let that car out." He laughed, shook his head and said, "You're officially my hero." As I zipped up my suitcase, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I declined. 30 seconds later, it buzzed again. This time, a voicemail. I didn't even have to listen to it to know who it was. Karen was the type to escalate fast. In her mind, everything was an emergency, and she was always the victim. I finally listened to the message an hour later out of morbid curiosity. "Mason, this is Karen. I'm calling to give you one final chance to unlock that garage and return my property before I'm forced to take legal action. I have every right to that space, and your behavior is bordering on criminal. I've notified the HOA and filed a formal complaint. If you don't respond within the hour, I will be involving the authorities." I played it again, laughing this time. She had every right to my garage? Unreal. Still, I wasn't dumb. Before I left town, I uploaded the photos of her car, the note, the security footage showing her sneaking around, and the HOA manager's written response confirming that no approval had been given. Everything backed up, time-stamped, and emailed to myself and my attorney cousin in Denver, just in case. I even printed a laminated sign and stuck it to the garage door. "Private property, unauthorized vehicle parked inside. Vehicle will be released at owner's discretion. Trespassers will be reported." Was it petty? Maybe. But after 3 years of tolerating her micromanaging, clipboard-wielding reign of terror, it felt more like justice. Karen had finally met a boundary she couldn't cross. And now, while she paced in her living room plotting HOA revenge, I was headed toward a mountain cabin, a fireplace, and 10 glorious days of silence. No Lexus. No HOA. And no Karen. Just me and the wide-open peace she had never learned to respect. I'd been at the cabin for a full 24 hours before my phone started lighting up like a Christmas tree. The first message came just after sunrise. I was sitting on the porch, watching mist rise off the pine-covered hills, coffee in hand, wrapped in the kind of silence you only get miles from civilization. My phone buzzed once, then again. Then 5 more times. Karen. Her name wasn't saved in my contacts, but I knew the number by now. It was burned into my memory like a bad ringtone. 7:12 a.m., Mason, this is Karen. Please unlock the garage. This is beyond unreasonable. 7:15 a.m., you are holding my vehicle hostage. I've consulted with a legal advisor. 7:20 a.m., per community guidelines, you may not restrict access to personal property. 7:23 a.m., I will be forced to escalate if I don't hear from you today. I read each one while taking slow sips of coffee, as relaxed as a monk in a Zen garden. The mountain air was cool and quiet. The contrast between my peaceful surroundings and her frantic digital shouting made the texts feel surreal, like reading a soap opera script while standing in a national park. I didn't respond. She texted again 2 hours later, this time with a photo of herself standing next to my closed garage door. She was holding a measuring tape against the concrete like she was conducting an official investigation. The caption read, "Documenting everything." That part actually made me laugh out loud. I imagined her standing in front of my garage with her clipboard, maybe even a ruler and a flashlight, trying to turn this into a federal case. 11:38 a.m., you have until 5 p.m. today to release my vehicle or I will file a police report for unlawful detainment of property. Ah, the old Karen threat level escalation. Predictable. I almost made bingo cards. Still, I wasn't going to ignore the situation entirely. I forwarded her texts to Matt, the guy checking on my house, along with a message, "Just FYI, the storm has officially begun. If she tries anything shady, document it. And make popcorn." He replied with a selfie of himself sitting in a lawn chair on my front porch, sunglasses on, sipping from a soda can. Already watching. By sunset, Karen's tone changed. The sharp, angry texts softened. 6:04 p.m., look Mason. I didn't mean to upset you. I thought you were the kind of neighbor who believed in helping others. Clearly, I was mistaken. 6:12 p.m. It's just a car. You could have talked to me. You didn't need to make this into a thing. Now she wanted to play the victim. Typical. Karen had one strategy: dominate, then guilt trip. When that didn't work, she'd gaslight, play helpless, or threaten lawsuits. It was her holy trinity of HOA warfare. But I wasn't falling for it. I muted the conversation and went back to my book. I had come to the mountains to clear my mind, and ironically, Karen was making that easier, not harder. Every ridiculous message, every overplayed threat, every pathetic attempt to reclaim control reminded me that I had finally drawn a line. And unlike every other neighbor, I wasn't going to erase it just because she got loud. Nope. This time, the line held. And the car? Still locked up tight, waiting exactly where she left it. It was day 3 of my mountain getaway, and the air was crisp with pine and freedom. I had just finished hiking a 2-mile trail near the ridge when my phone buzzed with a message from Matt. Dude. Cops just showed up at your house. Karen's out front waving her clipboard like she's on CSI Suburbia. I nearly dropped my water bottle from laughing. Matt followed up with a photo. Sure enough, there were 2 uniformed officers standing in my driveway next to Karen, who was animatedly gesturing at the garage door with her arms flailing like she was directing air traffic. Her face was twisted in a theatrical scowl, and she was holding a folder, probably filled with printouts of community bylaws she didn't actually understand. I called Matt. Please tell me you're filming this, I said. Oh, absolutely. Bodycam Matt is on duty, he chuckled. Want the play-by-play? Hit me. So they knock, I answer. I explain you're out of town. Karen interrupts, loudly, and starts talking about unlawful imprisonment of her vehicle and abuse of community trust. One of the officers asks if she has any kind of lease, written permission, or documentation showing she has rights to the garage. I could already guess the answer. She says, and I quote, "I left a note. A firmly written note." I nearly choked on my energy bar. Matt kept going. They ask me if I have authority to open the garage. I say nope, just house sitting. They ask if she broke in. I tell them about the keypad. They ask her how she got the code. And she says, it was on his mailbox. Public domain. One of the cops literally blinked like he was rebooting. Classic Karen logic: trespass first, justify later. Anyway, Matt said, they told her it's a civil matter, not criminal. That it's your private property, and unless there's a court order or actual lease agreement, there's nothing they can do. And Karen? Oh, she threatened to call a news station. Said this was neighborhood hostage-taking. One of the officers actually laughed. I leaned back on the cabin deck and grinned at the sky. The stars were starting to come out early, and Karen's legal crusade had just hit a brick wall of common sense. Thanks, Matt, I said. I owe you a 6-pack and steak when I get back. Dude, he said, I haven't had this much entertainment since HOA movie night turned into an actual fistfight. We hung up, and I took a deep breath, letting it all soak in. Karen had finally done it. She'd pushed so hard, trespassed so confidently, that she had the cops involved, only to have it blow up in her face. And still, she was out there, waving her clipboard like it gave her constitutional authority. But what Karen never understood, and probably never would, is that power isn't about how loud you are. It's about knowing your limits, and respecting others. Something she'd never learned. So now, for the first time in years, the entire neighborhood was seeing her without the veil of HOA authority. No rules. No votes. Just a woman screaming about a garage she didn't own, locked away from a car she didn't have permission to park. I poured myself a whiskey, toasted the stars, and took another sip. 3 days in. 7 to go. And Karen? She could keep flailing all she wanted. That Lexus wasn't going anywhere. Day 4. I was deep into a good book, some high-stakes legal thriller ironically, when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen pop up in months: Green Valley Estates HOA. Not Karen. The actual board. The collective that typically only sent out newsletters about lawn heights and festive mailbox decor limits. For them to be calling me directly meant one thing: Karen had escalated again. I let it ring twice, then answered. Hello. A polite but clipped voice came through the line. Mr. Holloway, this is Sandra Whitaker from the Green Valley Estates HOA board. Do you have a moment to speak? I smirked. Sure. Is this about Karen? A sigh. Not long. Not dramatic. Just the tired exhale of someone who'd clearly been dealing with her all week. Yes, Sandra said. It is. I could practically hear the folder in her hands. She's filed multiple complaints, she continued, alleging that you've locked her vehicle in your garage and are refusing to release it. That's correct. There was a pause, as if Sandra wasn't quite sure what to do with my blunt honesty. She also claimed she had HOA approval to use your space temporarily while her driveway was being repaved. She didn't, I said flatly. I checked with you guys before I left. Yes, and thank you for forwarding us the photos, the security footage, and your formal email. Very thorough. That was surprising. I expected bureaucratic indifference. But Sandra sounded appreciative. Mr. Holloway, she continued, off the record. This isn't the first time Karen has, shall we say, overstepped her role as block captain. No kidding, I muttered. She has no legal right to your property, Sandra said more firmly now. And based on the documentation you provided, it's clear she accessed your garage without permission. That is trespassing. We've explained this to her repeatedly, but she insists on making it a community matter. Let me guess, I said. She's threatening to call an emergency meeting? She already did. Scheduled it. Nobody came. That made me actually laugh. Nobody. She sat alone in the clubhouse for an hour. Sent out an email afterward claiming everyone was intimidated into silence by your hostile presence. You weren't even in the state, were you? 4 hours away, I said. In a cabin. No HOA in sight. Sandra laughed quietly on the other end. Mr. Holloway, if it were up to me, we'd take stronger action against her behavior. But HOA rules being what they are, well, you know. I do, I said. That's why I handle things my way. I figured, she replied, her tone more amused than judgmental. Look, officially, we can't condone what you've done. But off the record, thank you for documenting everything. You've probably saved us hours of legal mediation. Well, I said, standing and stretching as I looked out over the valley, maybe this is the wake-up call she needed. She doesn't wake up, Mr. Holloway, Sandra said dryly. She just reloads. We both chuckled. Enjoy the rest of your vacation, she said. Let us know if she tries to retaliate. And, between you and me, the neighborhood's rooting for you. That caught me off guard. Really? She's made enemies of nearly everyone. People are tired. You're just the first one who stood your ground. I hung up with a smile on my face and a quiet sense of vindication warming my chest. Karen had dragged in the police, the board, and half the block. And one by one, they were all seeing her for who she really was. And me? I was just getting started. Day 5. Matt sent me the video around noon. The message read, "Bro, you're gonna want popcorn for this one." I was halfway through making a grilled cheese sandwich on the cabin's cast iron skillet. One bite later, I tapped play. The footage opened on a sunny afternoon in front of my house. Karen was standing in the middle of the street, flanked by 2 lawn chairs, hers and one she must have dragged from someone else's front porch. She wore a wide-brimmed sun hat, oversized sunglasses, and a t-shirt that said "Respect is earned." She looked like a protester who got lost on the way to the courthouse. In her hands, a large cardboard sign duct-taped to a broomstick. It read, "Free my CR, end the tyranny." I choked on my sandwich. Matt had filmed the whole thing from his position across the street, comfortably seated on my porch with a soda in one hand and his phone in the other. You could hear him quietly laughing behind the camera. Karen was pacing now, ranting loud enough for everyone within a 3-house radius to hear. This is unacceptable. This man has imprisoned my property. What kind of community allows this behavior? A couple of neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains. One guy, Greg, I think his name was, came out to water his lawn and immediately turned around when he saw Karen waving her sign. She pointed at my house, then at the garage. This is what happens when people don't stand up to bullies. A teenager on a bike rolled past her slowly. She yelled after him, "Tell your parents." Matt panned the camera toward another neighbor, Cheryl, who stood on her lawn with her tiny dog. She gave Matt a thumbs up and whispered, "Finally." Back to Karen. She had now started marching in slow circles, chanting, "Let the Lexus go. Let the Lexus go." It didn't rhyme. It didn't catch on. At one point, she pulled out her phone and did a live stream. "We're going public with this. People need to know what kind of tyranny is happening in the suburbs of America. This isn't just about my car, this is about freedom." Matt zoomed in on her screen and whispered, "2 viewers. One's probably her cousin." By the time the video ended, Karen was sitting in one of the lawn chairs, fanning herself with her HOA handbook, clearly exhausted from her own theatrics. Her sign was now leaning against a shrub, and no one had joined her. Not even the birds. Matt texted again. She stayed out there for 2 hours. 0 supporters. Cheryl brought her lemonade though. I think it was just to keep her quiet. I replied, "I love our neighborhood." Another video came later that evening. This one was shorter, just 30 seconds, but golden. Karen was being gently escorted back to her house by an older man I didn't recognize. He looked like he regretted every life decision that had brought him to this point. She pointed one last time at my garage and shouted, "This isn't over, Mason. You'll regret this." Matt's voice behind the camera, "Pretty sure you will first, Karen." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my drink. Here was the queen of the HOA, the self-appointed enforcer of all things lawn-related, reduced to a sidewalk protest and a broomstick sign. No board backing her. No neighbors cheering. Just a spectacle of her own making. And me? I was still in the mountains. Still offline. Still free. And that Lexus? Still exactly where she left it. Day 6. At precisely 3:07 a.m., Matt's phone buzzed him awake. It wasn't a call, or a text, or even a person. It was the screeching, migraine-inducing car alarm of a Lexus, blaring from inside my garage like a dying robot being tossed. He sent me the video before I even finished yawning from the notification. The footage opened in night vision mode. My driveway was still, shadows dancing under the motion lights. Then from inside the garage, WHAA. The unmistakable wail of Karen's luxury SUV trying to wake the entire block. Matt's voice came through, low and groggy. She's either losing her mind or trying to summon the HOA gods. He walked out to the porch in flip-flops and boxers, holding his phone in one hand and a mug in the other. He panned to the garage door, then zoomed in. Nothing visibly tampered with. "It's coming from inside the garage," he whispered, like he was in a horror movie. "Mason, your house is haunted by Karen." I replied with a simple text, "Did she break in again?" Matt, no sign of it. All doors locked. No activity on the cameras. But man, this alarm is loud. At 3:15 a.m., the alarm cut off. The sudden silence was eerie. For a few seconds, nothing but the chirp of crickets and the slow blink of the motion sensor light. Then the garage was quiet again. At 3:30 a.m., it started again. WHAA. This time, Matt didn't even say anything. He just held up the phone and recorded the chaos from his window. Second wave. You think she set the panic mode from her house? It wouldn't surprise me. Karen was desperate now. The cops had failed her, the HOA board had abandoned her, and her neighborhood protest had turned into a solo act. Now she was resorting to weaponized noise pollution. Matt texted again, "Want me to cut the battery?" I replied, "Tempting. But let her wear it out. I want the battery dead and the story to last." By the third time the alarm went off, at 4:05 a.m., Matt said 2 neighbors had turned on their porch lights. One guy even stepped outside in a bathrobe and shouted, "Turn that thing OFF," into the darkness. Karen didn't show herself. No sign of her walking up. No confrontation. Just the Lexus, locked away, screaming into the void. Matt's final text of the night said it all. It's like her car is having a nervous breakdown on her behalf. The next morning, I woke to a series of group texts from neighbors. "Greg, anyone know what that car alarm was about last night? Thought we were being invaded." "Cheryl, it's Karen's car. Mason's garage. Long story. Not his fault." Another neighbor, "Figures. That woman's been unhinged all week." No one blamed me. No one defended her. The narrative was shifting, fast. Karen's stunt had backfired again, and now even the neighbors who once avoided drama were realizing something. The drama was always hers to begin with. And that Lexus? Still there. Only now, it had finally shut up. Like its owner should have days ago. Day 10. The trip had been incredible. Clean air, no HOA meetings, no phone calls, and definitely no Karen. But even paradise has to end eventually. I pulled into Green Valley Estates around noon, and the moment I turned the corner onto my street, I saw her. Karen. Perched on a folding chair at the edge of her lawn like a predator in yoga pants. Sunglasses on. Clipboard in hand. And a smug expression that practically screamed, "I've been waiting for this." She stood the instant my truck slowed down. I parked in my driveway and barely had time to kill the engine before she was at my window, rapping on the glass like an overzealous meter maid. I rolled it down 2 inches. Enough for sound. Not enough for Karen. "Well," she began, "look who finally decided to come back." "Morning, Karen," I said flatly. She held up a stack of papers, clearly printed emails, copies of bylaws, and what I'm pretty sure was a parking map of the community. "You've committed multiple violations, Mason. I've documented everything. I've contacted legal counsel. You will be hearing from us." Us being the HOA, she snapped. "Didn't the board already tell you to drop this?" She faltered for half a second, just enough to notice. "That was before you left an innocent woman's vehicle locked away for over a week." "Innocent women don't break into garages," I said. "Also, you're not locked out. You're trespassing." She was winding up now, arms flailing, voice rising. "I left a note, Mason. That's implied consent. And you've caused me distress, public embarrassment, emotional damage, and a lot of lost sleep for the neighborhood," I interrupted. "Heard about the 3 a.m. car alarm." Her face twisted. "That wasn't me. Must have been a technical glitch. Triggered from your remote key fob?" I said, stepping out of the truck. 3 times. She didn't answer that. I walked toward the garage while she trailed behind, firing off threats. "You'll be fined. You'll be sued. The board might have ignored it, but I won't." "Karen," I said, turning to face her, "I already spoke with Sandra from the board. She called your protest theater." She blinked. "You sat alone in a clubhouse for an hour shouting about tyranny. You posted live videos that got 5 views. You called the police and got laughed off your own sidewalk. That one hit." She crossed her arms tightly and hissed, "You think this is funny, don't you?" "No, Karen," I said calmly, unlocking the front door. "I think it's over." She stood on my steps like she still had power. But her eyes darted, toward the neighbors watching from porches, toward Matt filming discreetly from across the street, toward the Lexus that was still tucked neatly behind the garage door she had no right accessing. "You want your car back?" I said. She perked up. "Call a tow truck. Have it removed, with my written permission. You'll need to be present. So will I. And you'll sign a waiver saying you entered illegally and take full responsibility." Her lips pressed into a tight line. "I'll even waive trespassing charges if you just go home." A long pause. Finally, she turned without a word and walked down my steps. No more threats. No more clipboard. Just the sound of her footsteps and a neighborhood that had, at long last, stopped taking her seriously. I stepped inside, closed the door, and let out a deep, satisfied breath. The king had returned. And the queen? Well, she'd just been checkmated. Not long after I returned home, the drama took its next predictable step, a lawsuit. Typical Karen, never one to back down even when she clearly had no case. The official notice arrived one morning, thick, printed on fancy letterhead, and delivered by a courier with a kind of smug smile that says, "Here comes trouble." The complaint alleged everything from unlawful confinement of property to emotional distress caused by my so-called refusal to release her Lexus. I skimmed the document, barely suppressing a laugh. The allegations were as flimsy as the cardboard sign she had wielded in the street. But I didn't take any chances. I hired a local attorney with experience in property law and HOA disputes. After explaining the situation, she smiled and said, "Sounds like you're in the clear. This is a classic case of trespassing and nuisance. Plus, You documented everything perfectly." I handed her the photos of Karen's SUV parked in my garage, the video of her street protest, and the text messages with the HOA board. It was like handing over a smoking gun. The legal process moved slowly but surely. Karen's side filed motions and counterclaims, but none of them held up under scrutiny. Her evidence was mostly hearsay and angry letters to the HOA board that never went anywhere. Meanwhile, the neighbors watched with interest. I could feel the shift. People who once whispered about Karen behind their doors were now openly supporting me, or at least quietly rooting for my side. At the first court hearing, Karen appeared flustered, clutching a thick binder of papers but unable to present anything concrete. My lawyer laid out the facts clearly. I had every right to lock my garage. Karen had no permission to park there. Her own behavior, unauthorized entry, causing disturbances and false claims, was the root of the conflict. The judge wasn't impressed. After a brief review, she dismissed most of Karen's claims and ordered mediation to settle the remaining issues. Karen left the courtroom looking defeated. It was the first time I saw cracks in her armor. Over the next few weeks, mediation sessions dragged on with Karen trying everything to paint me as the villain. But with every attempt, the facts were on my side. Eventually, the settlement was straightforward. Karen agreed not to trespass again, acknowledged that she had no rights to park in my garage, and dropped all claims for damages. She was also ordered to pay court costs, a humiliating blow for someone who had tried so hard to bully her way through the neighborhood. By the time it was over, the HOA board even reached out to me personally, apologizing for the chaos and assuring me that Karen's behavior wouldn't be tolerated moving forward. It was a victory not just for me, but for everyone fed up with her antics. As for Karen, she disappeared from the HOA meetings and the neighborhood watch emails. I haven't seen her out on the street since. Sometimes, when I'm in my garage, I smile to myself knowing that locking that door wasn't just about protecting my property. It was about standing up to a bully and showing that boundaries matter. The Lexus? Still parked safely inside, now a symbol of the time I took back control of my own home. After the lawsuit drama fizzled out and Karen was finally forced to back off, the neighborhood felt like a heavy weight had been lifted. It was almost as if the whole community had been holding its breath, waiting for this chapter to close so everyone could get back to normal. The first thing I noticed was the change in the air, less tension, fewer whispers, and far fewer suspicious glances when I walked down the street. The neighbors were no longer caught between two camps, Team Karen or Team Mason. Instead, people just wanted peace. I started getting waves of goodwill in small but meaningful ways. Cheryl from across the street stopped by one afternoon with a batch of homemade cookies and a sheepish smile. "Thanks for standing up to her," she said quietly. "You did what no one else dared." Greg, the lawn guy who once avoided eye contact, gave me a firm handshake and even joked about borrowing my grill for a neighborhood cookout. The HOA board also stepped up, holding a meeting to reassure everyone that no one else would get a free pass to police the neighborhood like Karen had tried to do. They promised stricter oversight and clearer communication. It felt like a reset button had been hit. The community began organizing again, block parties, weekend barbecues, and even a small book club that Cheryl dragged me into. The energy shifted from paranoia to genuine connection. Kids played in the streets again without fear of a hostile Karen patrol, watching every move. The Lexus, once a symbol of chaos, had become an inside joke. Matt even made a meme of it captioned, "The only car that won't move faster than the drama." It circulated quietly among our group of friends, bringing chuckles when things felt too serious. But beyond the jokes, something real had changed. People talked about property lines and HOA rules with a little more respect, and a lot less fear. Karen's reign of petty terror was over, replaced by a renewed sense of community ownership and trust. Even those who hadn't said much before started volunteering for neighborhood events. I found myself casually chatting with neighbors who had once avoided me. It was like the walls we'd built were coming down. Standing on my porch one evening, I looked out at the quiet street lit by porch lights and fireflies. The sound of laughter drifted from a backyard grill where families gathered. I thought back to the first morning when Karen parked in my garage and the strange noise that started it all. It had seemed like the beginning of a nightmare, but it turned into a story about standing firm and winning. For the first time in a long time, Green Valley Estates felt like home again. And that was worth every minute of those 10 wild days. Looking back on those 10 crazy days, It's wild to think how something as simple as a garage door could spiral into a full-blown neighborhood drama. But more than that, this whole saga taught me a lot, not just about my community, but about standing up for yourself, boundaries, and what really matters when the chips are down. First, I learned the importance of knowing your rights. I'd always thought of the HOA as some faceless group with rules you just had to follow, no questions asked. But when Karen crossed the line, parking in my garage without permission, I realized that ownership comes with real rights. I wasn't just a tenant in the neighborhood, I had control over my own property. That meant I could enforce boundaries and expect respect. Second, I saw how power can corrupt even the smallest organizations. The HOA board, which was supposed to represent all of us, was either unwilling or unable to stop Karen's antics at first. It showed me how important it is to stay engaged in your community and not let a single person run the show unchecked. Third, patience and measured response win over rash reaction. It was tempting to lash out right away, to call the cops or confront Karen face to face, but I stayed calm, documented everything, and played the long game. That approach not only kept me sane but gave me the upper hand when it came time for legal battles. Fourth, I learned that community matters, even when it feels like everyone is against you. Matt's videos and texts kept me connected and reminded me I wasn't alone. Neighbors started to see the truth as the drama unfolded, and in the end, they sided with fairness and common sense. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes, standing your ground is about more than just protecting your property, it's about protecting your peace of mind. That locked garage door wasn't just a barrier to a car, it was a statement: I won't be bullied or pushed around in my own home. And yeah, the Lexus stayed put, but it became a symbol, not of conflict, but of setting limits and reclaiming control. So if you're ever in a situation where someone's overstepping, remember, you don't have to escalate the drama or lose your cool. Know your rights, keep your evidence, stay patient, and sometimes, a simple locked door can speak louder than 1,000 words. Because in the end, your home is your sanctuary, and no Karen is going to take that away from you. The aftermath of the Karen saga didn't just bring peace to my street, it shook the entire HOA to its core and forced some much-needed change. Before all this, the HOA felt like an invisible force that only made life harder. Meetings were sparse, communication was poor, and enforcement was uneven. Some residents were in the dark about their rights, and others just tolerated the status quo because nobody wanted to ruffle feathers. Karen's behavior and the ensuing conflict put a spotlight on these issues. When the dust settled, the HOA board realized ignoring or dismissing community concerns wasn't an option anymore. For starters, they revamped their communication strategy. Instead of sending out dry, generic emails or relying on a notice board no one checked, they started a monthly newsletter, sent by email and posted in the community app, that laid out everything from upcoming meetings to neighborhood policies in clear, straightforward language. They also created a dedicated complaints and conflict resolution channel, staffed by a neutral third party, so issues wouldn't fester or escalate like mine did. Residents could now report problems confidentially, and the HOA was required to respond promptly. Board meetings became more frequent and transparent, with summaries posted online and open Q&A sessions scheduled regularly. Suddenly, the HOA wasn't just a group of faceless volunteers, it was a team working for the neighborhood's best interests. One of the biggest wins was the introduction of a formal code of conduct for board members and residents alike, including clear consequences for abuse of power or harassment. Karen's repeated oversteps had exposed the lack of accountability, and this change was designed to prevent future Karens from running roughshod. The board also started offering educational workshops on homeowner rights and responsibilities. These sessions helped residents understand the balance between community rules and individual freedoms, reducing misunderstandings and conflicts. On a more personal level, a few board members reached out to me to thank me for standing firm and helping to bring these issues to light. They said my calm, documented approach inspired a more professional and community-focused HOA culture. I even volunteered to help organize some neighborhood events, figuring that positive engagement was the best way to rebuild trust. All in all, the HOA went from being a shadowy, often frustrating presence to a more approachable, accountable organization. It wasn't perfect, no system ever is, but the lessons learned from that wild week made it stronger and more responsive. And as for Karen? The new rules and community vigilance meant she didn't have the platform to cause trouble anymore. People knew what was acceptable, and more importantly, what wasn't. So yeah, locking my garage door was just the start. The real victory was seeing a community learn, adapt, and grow stronger because we refused to let one person's drama define us. The ripple effect of the Karen incident didn't stop at the HOA board or me. It spread throughout the entire neighborhood, changing the way we all interacted, trusted each other, and took ownership of our community. Before the drama, many neighbors kept to themselves. We exchanged polite nods or quick hellos, but no one really got involved beyond their own yards. The HOA meetings were dull and sparsely attended. Most people felt powerless or unwilling to rock the boat, especially when someone like Karen held so much sway. But once the dust settled and Karen's influence faded, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. I noticed neighbors becoming more open and communicative. Porch conversations grew longer, kids played together more freely, and block parties went from rare events to seasonal staples. It was like we'd collectively decided to reclaim our streets and social lives. People started looking out for each other in ways I hadn't seen before. If a package was left on a doorstep, someone would grab it inside if the homeowner was away. Mail got collected, tools borrowed and returned, and even simple favors exchanged without hesitation. This new sense of community ownership was a direct result of everyone realizing how fragile neighborly trust can be when someone abuses power or breaks the rules. We learned that standing together wasn't just about preventing drama, it was about creating a better place to live. Another big change was the willingness to speak up. Before, many people kept quiet out of fear or apathy, letting problems fester. But after watching how calmly and effectively I handled the situation, neighbors felt empowered to voice their concerns when something wasn't right. The neighborhood watch group, once ignored, became more active and better organized. They held meetings with clear agendas, rotated leadership, and coordinated directly with the HOA to ensure proper follow-up on issues. People also became more educated about their rights and responsibilities. The workshops organized by the HOA, combined with informal knowledge sharing among neighbors, helped us understand not just what the rules were, but why they existed and how to protect our individual freedoms while respecting the community. This awareness helped reduce petty conflicts and misunderstandings. Instead of jumping to conclusions or escalating tensions, people began taking the time to verify facts and approach problems with empathy and reason. Interestingly, the incident even sparked a few new friendships. Matt and I, who started documenting the whole saga, became unofficial neighborhood historians and community advocates. Cheryl and Greg, longtime residents, stepped up as event organizers. Together, we started planning monthly gatherings, cleanups, and charity drives. The vibe of Green Valley Estates changed from one of quiet tolerance to active engagement. The streets felt safer, friendlier, and more alive. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. A handful of longtime residents who preferred the old quiet status quo grumbled about the new activism. But even they had to admit the neighborhood felt better. The final proof of this transformation came last summer during the annual block party. Over 100 people showed up, kids, families, retirees, and newcomers alike. We laughed, shared food, and celebrated the simple joy of community. Standing there, I realized that the real victory wasn't just about stopping Karen. It was about inspiring a neighborhood to care enough to stand up for itself and to build something better together. Sometimes, it takes one dramatic moment to shake people awake. And sometimes, it takes one locked garage door to unlock an entire community's heart. One of the most surprising parts of this whole saga was how I managed to take a full 10-day vacation right in the middle of the chaos, and why that break turned out to be one of the smartest moves I made. When Karen first parked in my garage, I knew the situation could spiral out of control. I could have stayed home, pacing the floors, calling lawyers, and confronting neighbors non-stop. But instead, I made a conscious choice. I was going to lock that door and walk away for a while. I booked the vacation before the full scale of the conflict had unfolded, but once the mess started, I realized it was a blessing in disguise. Here's how I managed it. 1. Preparation was key. Before I left, I made sure everything was in order. I sent a detailed email to the HOA board and the neighborhood watch, notifying them of the situation and my plans. I gave contact info for my lawyer and myself in case of emergency. I also left a trusted neighbor in the loop, a friend who could check on the house, take in mail, and keep an eye out. 2. Documentation and evidence. I organized all the photos, videos, texts, and emails into a single folder accessible online. This way, even if I was halfway across the country, my lawyer and I could keep track of developments. It helped me stay informed without needing to be physically present. 3. Trusting the process. Instead of micromanaging every move, I trusted my lawyer to handle the legal side. I also trusted my neighbor to watch the house and report back. This gave me the mental space to relax and focus on something other than the drama. 4. Mental reset. Taking a break gave me a much-needed mental reset. I spent those 10 days hiking, reading, and simply enjoying time away from screens and stress. It was a reminder that while property disputes can feel all-consuming, they don't have to take over your life. 5. Staying connected, but not obsessed. I checked in once a day, skimmed updates, and responded to urgent messages, but I didn't dive deep into every rumor or complaint. This balance kept me informed but sane. 6. Preparing for my return. As my vacation neared its end, I coordinated with my lawyer to make sure we were ready for next steps. I used that time to plan how I'd handle the final stages of the conflict, knowing I'd return with a clear head and fresh energy. In hindsight, that vacation was more than a break, it was a strategic move. It kept me grounded, prevented burnout, and gave me perspective. By the time I came home, I was ready to tackle whatever came next with calm and confidence. Sometimes, stepping back is the best way to move forward. And locking that garage door? It wasn't just about keeping Karen out, it was about taking control of my time, my space, and my peace of mind. The whole ordeal with Karen parking in my garage and the resulting neighborhood drama taught me some invaluable lessons about boundaries and respect, lessons that go far beyond just a locked garage door. First and foremost, I learned that boundaries are essential. Whether it's your property, your time, or your peace of mind, setting clear limits is the foundation of healthy relationships and communities. When Karen parked her car in my garage without permission, it was more than an inconvenience, it was a blatant disregard for my space and rights. That moment underscored how important it is to protect your personal boundaries before others trample all over them. Secondly, respect is a two-way street. I always tried to be a good neighbor, returning borrowed tools, keeping my yard tidy, and attending community events. But respect also requires reciprocity. Karen's actions showed me what happens when someone feels entitled to cross lines without accountability. Standing firm wasn't about being harsh, it was about demanding the respect that every homeowner deserves. I also realized how communication can prevent a lot of conflict. Many disputes arise because people don't talk or don't listen. When Karen parked in my garage, I tried reaching out calmly to the HOA and the board before things escalated. Unfortunately, the silence and dismissal only fueled the problem. This taught me to keep communication open but firm, and to document everything in writing. It's not just about being polite, it's about creating a clear record that protects you. Another big lesson was the value of patience and strategic thinking. It's tempting to react emotionally when someone violates your space, but responding rashly can make things worse. I found that staying calm, gathering evidence, and letting the legal process work in my favor was far more effective than shouting or getting drawn into petty arguments. On a broader level, I learned that community respect builds stronger neighborhoods. After the conflict, neighbors seemed more mindful of each other's rights and feelings. We began to look out for one another rather than compete or gossip. That shift didn't just improve day-to-day life, it created a safer, more supportive environment for everyone. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, I learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. It took courage to lock that garage door and refuse to back down when Karen tried to bully me. But that stand protected not only my property but my peace of mind and my family's sense of security. If you let someone violate your boundaries once, it sends the message that it's okay, and that only invites more disrespect. So if there's one takeaway from this whole saga, it's this: know your boundaries. Communicate clearly. Demand respect. And don't be afraid to stand firm when those things are threatened. Because in the end, those boundaries don't just protect your property, they protect your dignity and your right to live peacefully in your own home. One of the smartest moves I made during the whole garage saga was to meticulously document everything. Looking back, it wasn't just helpful, it was absolutely essential to how I navigated the conflict and ultimately came out on top. From the moment I noticed Karen's car inside my garage, I started taking photos and videos. I recorded timestamps on my phone, capturing every moment that car was there without permission. I also saved every text message, email, and voicemail related to the incident, whether from Karen, the HOA board, or neighbors. This digital trail became my strongest weapon. Why was documenting so important? For one, it provided clear, indisputable evidence. In disputes like this, especially those involving an HOA and neighbors, emotions run high and stories can easily get twisted or exaggerated. Having a solid record helped me cut through the noise and prove exactly what was happening, no guesswork needed. This documentation also made it easier to communicate with my lawyer. Instead of relying on shaky memories or vague descriptions, I had concrete proof to share. That allowed my lawyer to build a stronger case quickly and respond effectively to the HOA's responses and Karen's antics. Another benefit was how it kept me calm and focused. When you're in the middle of a dispute, it's easy to get overwhelmed or emotionally reactive. But by taking photos or jotting down notes, I gave myself a productive outlet. It felt like I was taking control, one documented step at a time. The documentation also helped during HOA meetings and community discussions. When I presented clear evidence rather than hearsay, it was harder for Karen or her supporters to dismiss my concerns or spin the story their way. It created accountability. Moreover, this detailed record was invaluable if the conflict escalated to legal action. Courts and mediators respect facts and evidence far more than emotional pleas or rumors. My documentation showed that I was reasonable, proactive, and serious about resolving the issue, qualities that helped sway opinions in my favor. Lastly, documenting everything helped protect me from false accusations or retaliation. If Karen had tried to twist the story or claim I was the aggressor, I had timestamps, photos, and records to prove otherwise. That peace of mind was priceless. So if there's one piece of advice I'd give anyone facing a similar situation, it's this: document everything. Don't rely on memories or trust that others will be honest. Take photos, save messages, keep notes, and organize it all carefully. It might seem tedious or excessive at first, but it's the best way to protect yourself and your property. And when the drama hits its peak, you'll be glad you have a clear, factual record backing you up. Because in disputes like these, the truth isn't just powerful, it's your strongest defense. In today's world, social media isn't just for sharing vacation photos or memes, it's a powerful tool that can shape how neighborhood disputes play out. In my case, social media became both a lifeline and a battleground during the whole garage saga. From the moment I realized Karen had parked in my garage without permission, I started documenting the situation on a private neighborhood group chat and a community app where most of my neighbors were active. Sharing photos and updates there helped spread the word quickly, and many neighbors chimed in with their own stories or support. One key benefit was transparency. Instead of rumors or one-sided gossip dominating the conversation, I was able to share real-time facts and evidence with the community. That helped prevent misinformation from spreading and gave neighbors a chance to see the situation from my perspective firsthand. The community app also became a way to mobilize support. People who had been hesitant to speak up before felt empowered to back me up publicly, report similar experiences, or demand accountability from the HOA board. It created a sense of solidarity that might never have existed without that digital space. But social media also brought challenges. Karen and some of her allies used the same platforms to push their narrative, sometimes posting misleading or inflammatory comments. That led to tense back-and-forth exchanges, with neighbors divided and emotions running high. I learned quickly that not every comment or post deserves a response. Engaging in online arguments often escalated tensions without solving anything. Instead, I focused on posting facts, staying calm, and letting the evidence speak for itself. Another lesson was the importance of privacy and discretion. Sharing updates on a public or semi-public platform risked exposing sensitive information or inviting unwanted attention. I made sure to keep certain legal details private and encouraged neighbors to respect confidentiality where necessary. Social media also helped when it came to organizing and communication. The HOA started using the platform more actively to share meeting notices, minutes, and updates, something they'd neglected before. This increased engagement made the HOA more accountable and approachable. In the end, social media was a double-edged sword. It amplified the conflict but also provided tools to manage it transparently and connect the community. The key was using it strategically, sharing facts, fostering dialogue, and avoiding unnecessary drama. If you ever find yourself in a neighborhood dispute, I highly recommend leveraging social media wisely. It can be a powerful ally if you use it to build trust and clarity, but it can also fuel flames if you get caught up in petty battles. For me, social media helped turn a frustrating, isolating situation into a community conversation, one that ultimately led to real change. When the whole garage parking incident blew up, the HOA board suddenly found itself in the spotlight. For years, they'd operated in the background, quietly enforcing rules and managing the neighborhood with little pushback. But this time, they had a big problem on their hands, and their response revealed a lot about how disconnected they had become from the community they served. At first, the HOA tried to downplay the situation. They sent out a generic letter stating that the parking rules had been enforced fairly, and that Karen had every right to use community property as she saw fit. This vague statement felt dismissive and only added fuel to the fire. Many neighbors felt the HOA was taking Karen's side without hearing the full story. The board then attempted to schedule a meeting to address concerns, but the notice was minimal and vague, leaving most residents either unaware or uninterested. The timing was inconvenient, too, a weekday afternoon when many working residents couldn't attend. This low engagement was a missed opportunity for the HOA to rebuild trust. When I tried to engage directly, the HOA was often unresponsive or evasive. Requests for documentation, evidence, or a clear explanation of their policies were met with delays or non-answers. This lack of transparency only deepened suspicions that the board was protecting Karen at the expense of fairness. Another failure was their inability to enforce boundaries consistently. The HOA had rules on paper, but enforcement was selective and sometimes arbitrary. Karen's blatant disregard for my garage space was ignored, while other minor infractions by less connected neighbors resulted in fines or warnings. This inconsistency frustrated many residents and made the board appear biased. During the conflict, the HOA also tried to rely heavily on intimidation tactics. They threatened fines against me for interfering with community property and sent letters warning of legal action. This aggressive posture made me realize that the HOA was more interested in protecting their image and Karen's interests than in resolving the dispute fairly. What really failed was the board's lack of proactive leadership. Instead of stepping up as neutral mediators or facilitators, they acted like defenders of the status quo. They didn't acknowledge the root issues: poor communication, lack of clear boundaries, or the toxic culture that allowed someone like Karen to overreach. Some board members privately admitted to me later that they felt overwhelmed or undertrained for handling conflicts of this scale. This exposed a systemic problem. The HOA was staffed mostly by volunteers who lacked the experience or resources to manage disputes professionally. The HOA also failed to engage the wider community in decision-making. Many neighbors expressed frustration that their voices weren't heard and that the board operated behind closed doors. This secrecy bred resentment and made the board appear unaccountable. One surprising failure was the board's initial refusal to accept external mediation. I proposed bringing in a neutral third party to help resolve the conflict, but the HOA resisted, worried it would expose their weaknesses. This defensiveness stalled progress and prolonged the dispute. Ultimately, the HOA's response showed that good intentions and written rules aren't enough. Effective leadership requires transparency, fairness, open communication, and willingness to admit when things have gone wrong. After the incident, the HOA did start making changes, improving communication channels, setting clearer policies, and introducing conflict resolution mechanisms. But those steps came only after the conflict escalated and residents demanded accountability. If there's a lesson here, it's this: HOAs need to be proactive, transparent, and genuinely community-focused. When they fail to engage residents and enforce rules fairly, conflicts aren't just inevitable, they spiral out of control. The garage incident was a wake-up call for our HOA. It forced them to confront their shortcomings and rethink how they serve our neighborhood. And it proved that when leadership fails, the community must stand strong, and sometimes, lock the garage door. After the storm of the garage incident and the tense standoff with the HOA, I knew that winning the legal and personal battle was only part of the challenge. The other, perhaps even bigger task, was rebuilding trust with my neighbors, the very community I called home. Trust, once broken, isn't something you can demand or force. It has to be earned through actions, patience, and genuine connection. The first step I took was acknowledging the tension openly. I didn't ignore the fact that emotions were high, and many neighbors had taken sides or felt uncomfortable with the public dispute. In a few casual conversations and community meetings, I made it clear that my goal wasn't to create division, but to protect my property and my rights while keeping the neighborhood safe and respectful. I also made an effort to listen actively. Instead of just sharing my side of the story, I asked neighbors about their concerns, frustrations, and hopes for the community. This showed that I cared about more than just my own situation, that I wanted to understand their perspectives and work toward common ground. Building trust also meant being consistent and reliable. I followed through on promises, whether that was attending meetings, helping with neighborhood events, or simply being available to chat. Over time, neighbors began to see me as someone who was dependable, approachable, and committed to the community's well-being. One of the most effective ways I rebuilt trust was through small acts of kindness and neighborliness. I volunteered to help organize community cleanups, offered to share tools, and even hosted a casual barbecue to bring people together in a relaxed, positive environment. These gestures broke down barriers and reminded everyone that we were more than the conflict. We were a neighborhood. Transparency was another crucial piece. I kept neighbors informed about ongoing developments, legal or otherwise, without oversharing or stirring drama. Providing clear, honest updates helped dispel rumors and build confidence that I wasn't hiding anything or stirring the pot unnecessarily. I also worked to bridge gaps with those who were skeptical or on the other side. Instead of avoiding difficult conversations, I sought out Karen supporters for calm, respectful dialogue. While not everyone agreed with me, many appreciated the effort to find common ground, which softened some of the hard feelings. In parallel, I advocated for better neighborhood communication channels. I pushed for improved newsletters, more frequent community meetings, and a digital platform where residents could share ideas and concerns openly. This infrastructure helped create a healthier environment for dialogue and reduced misunderstandings that had fueled the original conflict. Importantly, I kept my focus on long-term relationship building rather than quick fixes. Trust takes time to rebuild, especially after a public dispute. By staying patient, consistent, and open, I gradually shifted the neighborhood atmosphere from suspicion and division to cautious cooperation, and eventually, toward a sense of renewed community spirit. The process wasn't perfect. There were setbacks and moments of frustration. But the overall progress was undeniable. Slowly but surely, neighbors started to approach me with friendly greetings, invitations, and even offers to collaborate on neighborhood improvements. In the end, what I learned is that rebuilding trust isn't just about resolving conflict. It's about reconnecting as people who share a space and a community. It requires humility, openness, and the willingness to put aside differences for the greater good. Standing firm to protect my rights was necessary, but so was extending an olive branch afterward. Together, these steps helped restore a sense of respect, safety, and belonging in our neighborhood. And that's a victory far greater than any legal win, because a community that trusts each other can weather any storm. Looking back on the whole saga of Karen parking in my garage and the battle that followed, I realized there are several things I would approach differently if faced with a similar situation again. While I'm proud of how I stood my ground and ultimately protected my property and rights, hindsight has a way of highlighting lessons only experience can teach. First, I would set clearer boundaries from the start. Before the situation escalated, I didn't explicitly communicate my expectations about my garage and property use to the HOA or neighbors. A clear, written notice or a direct conversation might have prevented Karen from even thinking about parking there without permission. Sometimes, what seems obvious to you isn't obvious to others, so making your boundaries crystal clear early on can avoid confusion and conflict. Second, I would try to engage the HOA proactively before the conflict escalated. I waited too long to push for a formal response and documentation from the board, which allowed the issue to fester. Early, direct communication with HOA leadership, requesting clear rules, procedures, and clarifications, might have prevented misunderstandings and shown my willingness to resolve the problem constructively. Another thing I'd do differently is to involve a mediator sooner. Neighborhood disputes can quickly get personal and messy. Bringing in a neutral third party early on, such as a professional mediator or community ombudsman, could have helped us avoid the prolonged tension and legal posturing that drain time and energy. Mediation encourages dialogue and compromise, and can often preserve relationships better than a confrontational approach. I also learned that documenting everything from day one is crucial, but I would streamline that process. Initially, I was inconsistent with my notes and photos, which made organizing the evidence stressful. Next time, I'd set up a dedicated folder or app to capture and sort information immediately and systematically. This small organizational step would save time and mental energy when the pressure is on. Another reflection is on the use of social media and community communication. While sharing updates publicly helped build support, it sometimes also fueled drama and division. Next time, I would be more selective and strategic about what I post and where. Private messages, direct calls, or controlled group chats with key neighbors might prevent misunderstandings or heated online arguments that distract from resolving the core issue. Emotionally, I'd prepare myself to manage stress and stay patient more effectively. It's easy to get frustrated or angry when you feel violated, but emotional reactions can cloud judgment or lead to rash decisions. Practicing mindfulness, taking breaks, and seeking outside support, whether friends, family, or professionals, can help maintain perspective and resilience throughout the conflict. I also recognize now that building bridges early on is invaluable. Instead of waiting until after the conflict peaked to engage neighbors and opponents with kindness and dialogue, I would make more effort from the outset to foster goodwill. Sometimes, investing in positive relationships early can prevent conflicts from spiraling out of control. Lastly, I would advocate for improving HOA policies and transparency proactively. If I were part of the HOA board or community leadership, I'd push for clear, fair parking policies, conflict resolution procedures, and open communication channels before disputes arise. Prevention is always better than reaction. In the end, every challenge is a chance to learn and grow. This experience has given me insights not just about property rights and HOA dynamics, but about human nature, communication, and resilience. I'm confident that if a similar situation ever comes up again, I'll be better prepared to handle it more smoothly and effectively. Because while standing your ground is important, standing smarter is even better. After everything that happened, from Karen parking in my garage without asking, to the weeks of tension, legal back and forth, and community drama, I've had a lot of time to reflect on what this whole experience meant. More than just a battle over a garage, it turned into a journey about standing up for yourself, learning the value of community, and figuring out how to move forward stronger than before. First, I want to emphasize that protecting your rights and property is your responsibility, and it's something you shouldn't hesitate to do. It can feel intimidating, especially when you're up against a powerful HOA or a difficult neighbor, but staying silent only encourages overreach. Speaking up with clear evidence, calm communication, and respect goes a long way. I learned that being firm doesn't mean being hostile. You can stand your ground while still maintaining your dignity. At the same time, this experience reminded me how important community really is. While the conflict initially created division, it also brought neighbors together in unexpected ways. People reached out, shared their own stories, and eventually worked together to demand better HOA leadership and more transparent policies. No matter how frustrating disputes can be, they reveal how interconnected we all are, and how much better life is when neighbors look out for each other. One big takeaway is the power of communication and transparency. Whether it's with neighbors, the HOA board, or even yourself, being clear, honest, and open prevents a lot of misunderstandings. I realize that many problems stem not from malice, but from assumptions and lack of information. If you can create spaces for dialogue and listen actively, conflicts lose a lot of their fuel. Moving forward, I'm committed to staying engaged with my community, not just as a homeowner, but as someone who wants to help build a safer, friendlier, and more accountable neighborhood. I plan to participate in HOA meetings, volunteer for committees, and encourage others to get involved too. Change doesn't happen by chance. It takes effort from everyone. This whole saga also gave me a new appreciation for resilience and patience. Conflicts like these aren't solved overnight. There are setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments when it feels like nothing's moving. But persistence pays off. By staying calm, documenting carefully, and focusing on solutions rather than grudges, I was able to protect my rights without burning bridges. I also want to remind anyone going through a similar situation, you're not alone. Many people have faced difficult neighbors or overbearing HOAs. Seek support from friends, legal advisors, or community mediators. Don't try to handle everything by yourself. Sometimes outside help is exactly what you need to turn things around. Looking ahead, my hope is that our neighborhood can use this incident as a catalyst for positive change. Stronger communication, fairer enforcement of rules, and more inclusive decision-making can prevent future conflicts. We can turn what was a source of frustration into an opportunity to build a more united community. Ultimately, I believe that every challenge holds a lesson. This was mine. It taught me how to be assertive without being aggressive, how to connect with others even when tensions run high, and how to find strength in standing up for what's right. So if you find yourself locked in a tough situation, whether it's a neighbor dispute, an HOA issue, or anything else, remember this story. Take a deep breath, gather your facts, communicate clearly, and don't be afraid to fight for your space and peace of mind. Because at the end of the day, your home should be your sanctuary, not a battleground. And with patience, persistence, and a little bit of strategy, you can move forward stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever. Thanks for sticking with me through this crazy story about how a simple garage issue turned into a fight for respect and personal rights. If you've ever felt like your own home wasn't being respected, remember, you're not alone, and standing up calmly but firmly really does make a difference. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more people know how to handle tricky neighbor or HOA situations. And drop a comment below. Have you ever dealt with a difficult neighbor or HOA drama? See you in the next story. Take care of your space, and stay strong.